let's take a look at the CSS Flexbox. This is a really easy way for us to create a web page that is responsive to the size of the browser. I really wish we had more of this content in our book, but we only have one project, but it's really cool with all the things that you can do with Flexboxes, and it's a little bit easier because you don't have to worry about like setting your positioning and things like that. Okay, so first let's kind of take a look and tinker on W3C School's website and kind of see what these Flexboxes allow us to do. So here, it is very important that whatever you want to flex in your website, basically what do you want to change the proportions of based on the size of the screen, you need to have in a container using the display property with a value flex. Okay, so if you remember way back in like chapter 3, I really pushed you guys to learn the difference between the property and a property's value. And that comes in handy now if you have that down pat, because with flexes, a flex can be a value or a flex can be a property. Eek, right? Okay, so you have to use display flex to start your flex property, start your flex box, basically. We'll just kind of think of it like that. So you can have display flex, or you could have, I think, display inline flex, if I'm not badly mistaken. But you need to have that. Now, if on your test it asked, what property do you use to configure a flex box? It is the display property. Flex can be a property as well, but it's the display property set to flex that configures a flex box. Okay. Now, in this case, we have another property called flex wrap, and there's some other properties that we use with the Flexbox pretty regularly: flex direction, flex wrap, and then the justify content, and then the flex property itself. Okay, so if we have flex set to wrap, and this is a container which we have applied here using the class flex container, when we resize our browser, it is going to automatically wrap that content for us. So based on how big or small our window is, it will automatically wrap. And we didn't do hardly anything to this. You know, we just added that a few lines of CSS, and look how well that responds to the size of the window. Okay, another thing we could do here, if we so choose, would be no wrap. And no wrap is going to resize the contents as the browser changes. So see how those contents are getting very, very small and larger based on the size of the window. So that's flex wrap, no wrap. And then you can do flex direction. The flex direction is another common property. And then if you set it to row, it will have them horizontal. You could also do column, and that would set them automatically vertical. So it's a really quick way to configure different things. Okay, so to practice with this, we are going to look at that Casita Sedona website in 7-11. So I do want you to open this up in a browser and get really familiar with it before we move on. I want you to look at the developer tools. So I use Command-Alt-J on the keyboard, or you can go View Developer, and I think it's under Developer Tools. Yeah, okay. So remember, I showed you this in a previous video. You can click this down arrow and click different sizes and see what your website looks. So let's see a really small, I know the iPhone 5 is really small, so let's take a look at what it looks like on there currently. So kind of get familiar with it. Notice that our nav section is up here and our nav section is vertical. Later on, we're going to make our nav section be down here and then wrap and be horizontal. Okay? So open 7-11 index in code. And the first thing that we're going to do, remember I said we had to have some kind of container that's going to contain the items that are going to flex or change. In this project, we want our nav, our main, and our aside to change. These are part of a 3-column layout. If we go back to our website, out of the developer tools. So after we configure our CSS here, we are going to have a 3-column layout. This nav section will be on the left, and then way down here, this guided hikes will be on the right in the aside section. So we'll kind of have a 3-column layout, and those are the 3 areas that we want to configure with our div. So scroll down right above your nav section. If you notice, our nav, main, and aside sections are encapsulated already in a div tag. We need to assign that div tag to the ID demo. Okay, so note that it has a comment, and we're going to apply the ID demo. Okay, so now let's go up to the CSS, and we've got some media queries. So I'm going to start right before those media queries. We are going to create ID called demo and use the display property to start our flex container. And then we want a flex direction of row. Okay. By default, that means that all of the items in our flex container would be the same size. So the nav would be the same size as the main, and the main would be the same size as the aside, and we probably don't want that. So we can use the flex property to change basically the percent of the screen it takes up. Okay, so let's add nav and the flex property, and we're going to set to a number. We're going to say 1, and basically that means like 10%. It's going to take up like 10% of the screen. And we're going to say the main is going to take up 70% of the screen, so we put in a 7. And the aside is going to take up 20% of the screen, so we'll put in a 2. Now, it's very important, and this is a question on your test. These numbers have to add up to 10 because it has to be 100% of the screen. So these numbers always have to be 10. If we had something like this, that wouldn't work because that's 11. And if we had something that added up to 9, that wouldn't work either. Okay, so these need to add up to 10. Now let's take a look in our browser, and we should have a 3-column layout. A lot easier than the way that we did it before, right, with the floats? I see. You did all that work for that Door County project, and you typed all of that content, and we could have just done a 3-column layout with just something as quick as that. How about that? Okay. Now we're going to make it appear differently on based on our media queries. So inside of our first media query, we're going to make this, and this would be the one for like a tablet device. We are going to change or modify that demo ID so that it displays a column instead of a row. So we'll do flex direction column. And then we're also going to change the way the navigation structure appears. So we're going to add nav ul display flex direction row. Oh, I misspelled row. And then we're going to justify content to center, and that will center our navigation. Okay, so let's refresh and see how we're looking now. It doesn't really look like anything when we're full screen, but when we move to tablet size, there we go. Okay, so it changed the way, you see, it went from 3-column to a single column layout. Our navigation structure went from a vertical to a horizontal, and then way down here is our side section. Okay, now let's change the way that it appears for the smartphone. On the smartphone, we want our navigation structure to appear all the way down at the bottom. And we can do this by changing a property called order. If we set nav order to 1, it makes the navigation section move to the bottom. And you can continue with other values, like you could say aside 2, and then make aside appear below the navigation section. So by changing that order property, you can change not where your content appears in your HTML, but where that content displays in the browser. And then to make our navigation section wrap, we're going to do navigation or navul flex wrap equals, or not equals, but set to wrap. Okay. Now this one, unless we, because I can't resize a browser window this small because it is, well, I don't know why I can't resize the browser this small, but we need to look at it in, see, it won't get that small. We need to look at it in, can't think of the word, the developer tools. So you can either do Command-Alt-J, that opens console, Command-Alt-I opens developer tools. Okay, so now if we set it smaller, wait, I didn't refresh. Now when we scroll all the way down to the bottom, let me pull this down a little bit, our navigation is down there. So pretty cool, huh? So hopefully with this project you can see that Flexboxes allow us to configure like multi-column layouts a lot easier than floating and using positioning, using like absolute position and all of that. And it is also more responsive to the size of the device that the person is viewing your site on.